Good morning. I am the Reverend Dr. Jennifer Hope-Tringali, and I'm delighted to be with you this morning as your keynote speaker. Since 2003, with the adoption of my first son, I have been intimately connected with the country of Guatemala. Initially, our family committed to partnering through our adoption agency with an orphanage in Guatemala to provide what they termed as humanitarian aid. Then friends and family, in particular our church family, began asking if they could come and see, joining our family in ministry. This soon became a ministry of our home congregation, Tree of Life, and within a couple of years formalized into the establishment of a 501c3 named Tree for Hope. As our partnership with the orphanage began rooting in Guatemala, I began leading groups on short-term mission trips lasting anywhere from 7 to 14 days. Some of the questions that I was asked before and during these short-term mission trips went a bit like this. What are we going to be doing? Why do people throw their trash along the road? How can we help those poor people? At the same time, our ELCA denomination held and still holds a theology of accompaniment, which speaks to how we relate globally to our neighbors, focusing on mutuality and walking together in solidarity. I quickly realized that many short-term mission trip travelers were not familiar with the ELCA's theology of accompaniment, and that travelers from a different denominational or no denominational background were familiar with definitions of accompaniment outside of the intention of the ELCA's theology. Reverend Rafael Malpica Padilla, the ELCA's Executive Director for Service and Justice, was foundational in establishing the ELCA's theology of accompaniment as it relates to global mission, defining accompaniment as walking together in solidarity, which is characterized by mutuality and interdependence. Malpica emphasized the relationality of accompaniment, where we engage the other as an equal, as a gifted child of God, in whom we see God's face and through whom God also comes to us, often using the Road to Emmaus Bible story as a helpful metaphor for accompaniment. Another Lutheran theologian, Dr. Mary Elise Lowe, has encouraged further development of the ELCA's understanding of accompaniment to emphasize interrelationality and mutuality using a Christian lens of Trinitarian relationship in juxtaposition with Martin Luther's writings on Coram Deo, which emphasizes human beings being connected to each other and the world through God's incarnational presence. At the same time, we continue in our denomination to explicate the language of accompaniment other denominations and even social service organizations use and struggle with their own definitions. One example, Pope Francis connected accompaniment with evangelism in the apostolic exhortation Evangelii Gaudium in 2013, describing the art of accompaniment as that which teaches us to remove our sandals before the sacred ground of the other. Since then, a plethora of theologians have sought to interpret and implicate the art of accompaniment both theoretically and practically within their organizations, ranging from professors of theological ethics to the Jesuit refugee services. Listed here on this slide are just a few of the uses of the language of accompaniment that I found described in current academic literature. For example, the field of spiritual direction uses the language of accompaniment, where a director accompanies a directee. Some theologians describe practices such as contemplative prayer, community organizing, hospitality, or advocacy as essential to accompaniment. Some define accompaniment using adjectives such as solidarity, mutuality, and interdependence. Others acknowledge power and privilege as something to be leveraged while practicing accompaniment, serving as allies and witnesses to hold up human rights and justice. Still others describe internal processes like conscience transformation, cultural and language learning as essential components of accompaniment. If you're interested in reading more about Lutheran and other denominational understandings of accompaniment, I've put together a list of books and journal articles for you that will be available. One could look at this vast array of definitions of accompaniment in a variety of ways, ranging from a beautiful array of possibilities to just simply confusing. In any case, this brings a theologian like myself who longs to bring theory into practical everyday use with some challenges. In a broad sense, the language of accompaniment is used in different ways by different bodies of people. We look at some of the descriptors of accompaniment from a religious denominational perspective, but also culturally, we use the word accompaniment, and most often in a context that implies a power differential. We might say that a parent accompanies a child across the street. We might accompany our friend to their chemotherapy appointments. We might accompany a friend experiencing addiction to an AA meeting. Or we might accompany someone experiencing homelessness as they search for housing, education, or a job. And as I sought to find resources within our own denomination to use with short-term mission trip travelers, I found other challenges. I had been introduced to some wonderful foundational documents in seminary written by the Global Mission Unit, but found they were never published or made available digitally. And though we have such rich Lutheran theology surrounding the concept of accompaniment with both biblical grounding and support from Martin Luther's writings, our repertoire of practical materials to use with short-term mission trips is lacking. Programming or curricula rooted in an ELCA accompaniment theology for relationship building before, during, and after global encounters is difficult to find and lacking of both individual and communal components. Resources on our ELCA denominational website under Global Mission are outdated, often over a decade old, and with problematic or defunct links. I would say an additional challenge, which I prefer to call an opportunity, is that our contemporary context in the Lower Susquehanna Synod is in nature more global than even a decade ago. Accompaniment programming was initially created for global relationships where partnerships were being formed between groups of people residing in different countries. However, our local communities now consist of people who have rich and diverse cultural backgrounds. And, as being defined a decade ago by the Pew Research Center as the whitest denomination in the United States, we have a lot of learning to do, don't we? We need to learn how to encounter each other in a way that honors God, each other, and the world around us. Which brings us to bold humility. About 2 years ago, I was talking to my husband about needing new language to talk about the theological concept of accompaniment with groups traveling to Guatemala on short-term mission trips. At that point, I had been leading groups of people for over 15 years, answering questions like those we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, doing my best to explain what accompaniment meant, and I found myself saying to him, what we really need is humility, bold humility. Now, my husband is a spiritual director and wisely asked me to pause for a moment and reflect on what I was learning and discerning, which led me into a rich journal reflecting on bold humility, a seed of language used in a conversation that would be watered and nurtured by the Holy Spirit as it grew into the infrastructure I had been longing to use with groups traveling to Guatemala. The language of bold humility is useful for a variety of reasons. Can we talk about being boldly humble? Yes. Can we talk about being humbly bold? Yes. So this is a dimensional phrase that can be explored in a variety of ways as a new language to use in teaching the theological concept of accompaniment, as it is culturally understandable and relevant. I am not the first one to use this phrase, bold humility. David Bosch has written extensively on global missions from the perspective of his experiences in South Africa. In his theological opus, Transforming Mission, Paradigm Shifts in Theology of Mission, which connects global mission and evangelism, he states, "We can only witness in humble boldness and bold humility to our understanding of that gospel," referencing that as humans, our understanding of God and salvation is individually limited. Bosch argues that bold humility is essential in admitting, and I quote, "We do not have all the answers and are prepared to live within the framework of penultimate knowledge, that we regard our involvement in dialogue and mission as an adventure, are prepared to take risks, and are anticipating surprises as the Spirit guides us into fuller understanding." Another theologian whose work aided me in developing the concept of bold humility is an Anglican priest named Matthew Wilcoxon, whose doctoral thesis explored humility as a divine attribute. In his book, entitled Divine Humility, Wilcoxon asks what divine humility means for human humility, considering the structure of humility is an active orientation toward the good of another. And further, that divine humility shows that humility can be decidedly active, a subversive force. Wilcoxon concludes, and I quote, "Humility captures the eternal disposition of God toward the sharing of his life with creatures in love and justice. Humility is divine." And though this second part has only been anticipated, humility is the way human beings participate in the being of the humble God, by active moral engagement for the good of others. Historically, short-term mission trip curriculum consisted of multi-session in-person meetings before travel, sometimes with group-guided reflection and discussion in country. Most often, if there was any post-travel component, it was simply a reunion after the trip to gather together again and reminisce. And if I'm honest with you, I will tell you we followed that format for years. But I began to notice that this format was insufficient and lacking in facilitating an understanding and expression of accompaniment. I would hear travelers describing an experience of transformation from their trip, also verbalizing that they got so much more than they feel they gave. They felt changed, and many questioned and felt uncomfortable in returning to their lives in the same way they had before the trip. However, they didn't easily navigate what to do next, how to initiate and follow a faithful response to their transformational in-country experience. In other words, was the mission trip an event or the beginning of a journey? I realized that a comprehensive program would need to include several essential components. The design of the program would need to be specific for short-term mission trip travelers from mostly congregational contexts. These groups include many of your congregations, and so you can verify that you are most often multi-generational groups consisting of people with pretty busy schedules, and pastors or deacons with full plates as well. So the Bold Humility program needed to be relevant to this context, providing opportunities to gather in person and virtually with easy-to-use resources. The program needed to provide resources to facilitate both individual and communal learning, reflection, and discernment, with realization and acknowledgement that while the individual might be going through a transformative process, a communal transformation is also a worthwhile place for intention, as this is where we transform our society, both locally and globally. The Bold Humility program needed to offer components before, during, and after travel that would facilitate the individual and communal learning, self-reflection, and discernment, providing a framework for a journey rather than an event or events. One of the most important pieces that had been lacking was an ongoing post-travel platform to both connect the experiential learning that occurred during the trip while also providing opportunity for ongoing education, also providing ideas, discernment, and opportunities for faith-based response. Finally, and most logistically, it was important to have some key anchors to this program, who I am terming the in-country and congregational facilitators, who would provide consistent communication and facilitation throughout the program. I will talk quite a bit more about both of these roles during my forum later today, which looks more specifically at the Bold Humility program and its use with short-term mission groups. I would like to share with you one other element that the Bold Humility program uses as a helpful metaphor to explore the theology of accompaniment through the lens of bold humility: backstrap loom weaving.
Hoy estoy haciendo el pepenado.
Pepenado.
Es el pepenado. Terminé la señorita. Hoy el pepenado encima de la señorita.
Ah, okay.
Ajá.
The señorita is the pattern that has like
Sí.
circles. And the pepenado?
Es pepenado.
Pepenado
Sí.
has the stripes. And so
Ajá.
she's doing the striped pattern now on top of the señorita.
Iván les decía. Iván.
I learned to weave from Doña Alcira, who you just saw weaving in the video. She spent many Saturday afternoons teaching me techniques, methodology, tautness of the loom, and patterning using an ancient and very loved piece of fabric with samples of weaving that had been passed down from grandmother to granddaughter for generations. More than these, she taught me to find joy and humor in our new relationship. I discovered bold humility, kneeling on the ground with her, sharing vulnerability and strength. I never finished my weaving, which you can see in the inset here. It hangs on my wall, remaining attached to all of the pieces of the loom with its scraggly threads sticking out, unfinished, just as you and I are. All pieces interconnected, a symbol of reliance on God and each other for support, love, and life. The metaphor of the backstrap loom weaving is used throughout the Bold Humility program to explore the concept of bold humility, offering a creative approach geared toward cultural learning, reflection, and discernment, emphasizing mutuality and interconnectedness with God and each other in an ongoing tapestry of creation. The Bold Humility program also uses a variety of methodologies throughout. I highly recommend to anyone coordinating a short-term mission trip to read and use the book Freeing Congregational Mission by Reverend Dr. Hunter Farrell and Reverend Bala Kellep. The authors, Director and Associate Director of the World Mission Initiative at the Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, list 3 foundational stones for short-term mission trips to include a theology of companionship, cultural humility, and empowering co-development. The Bold Humility program sought to focus on these 3 areas throughout pre-, during, and post-travel opportunities for learning and relationship building. Cultural humility is an essential part of Bold Humility, and in this program is part of the emphasis placed on language and cultural learning and self-reflection before, during, and after travel. Co-development is continually pointed to in the programming of Tree for Hope in Guatemala to participants and how long-term partnership best facilitates this empowerment. A point of interest is that the term companion was preferred over accompaniment by the authors as more helpful language to point toward human relationship. Companion literally translates in Spanish to compañero, compañera. However, in Spanish, this word holds a deeper sense of commitment. I chose to use Freeing Congregational Mission as a resource for both the creation of the Bold Humility program as well as a resource used within the program as a book study in the post-travel calendar of opportunities. A Central American specific methodology called Dinámicas was another methodology incorporated into the Bold Humility program. Dinámicas are used throughout Central America as a tool to create interaction and teamwork while exploring and learning about a particular topic or theme. The word dinámica literally translates as dynamic, and though dynamic is a good adjective to describe the process of using dinámicas, the word in and of itself is not comprehensive. Dinámicas naturally operate to help participants to remember material since they are highly interactive, often similar to preparing a skit or other dramatic performance. The modes of learning are active, involving visual, auditory, and kinesthetic in a variety of ways. Dinámicas do not require participants to read or write, but simply to be present together throughout the experience. The discovery aspect of Dinámicas is primary, steering away from lecture-based style of delivering information. Another methodology consulted in the design of this program was that of Jane Vella's revised edition of Learning to Listen, Learning to Teach, The Power of Dialogue in Educating Adults. Vella notes that a significant issue when educating adults is the perceived distance between teacher and student, and proposes 12 principles and practices to create opportunities for dialogue, including a needs assessment, safety in the environment and the process, sound relationships between teacher and learner and among learners, sequence of content and reinforcement, praxis with action and reflection, respect for learners as decision makers, ideas, feelings, and actions, immediacy of learning, clear roles, teamwork, engagement, and accountability. The Bold Humility program sought to embody these 12 principles throughout, from using the verbiage of facilitator and participant to continually engaging in action, reflection, and discernment in community. Finally, Bloom's taxonomy, as shown on this slide, was used throughout the Bold Humility program in creating its goals and objectives. The focus of Bloom's taxonomy is on moving from learning concrete retention toward more critical problem solving. At the same time, a focus is placed on developing new habits, skills, and perspective. Specific to Bloom's taxonomy, participants of the Bold Humility program engage in activities designed to begin at the bottom of the pyramid, moving up the pyramid throughout their experience in country and upon return home. For example, pre-trip learning focuses on concrete learning and retention of facts about the Guatemalan economy and its connectedness to our consumerism. While in country, participants begin to reflect upon and analyze their specific individual and congregational contexts and how they're connected with their experiences in Guatemala. And then after the short-term mission trip, participants move toward evaluation of themselves, their habits, their perceptions, and their actions to intentionally create new or modified ones based on their own personal and group communal discernment. The theological concepts of accompaniment and humility are the major focuses of the Bold Humility program, specifically explored as they relate to global relationship building and evangelism. The language for Bold Humility was chosen as new language to use in teaching the theological concept of accompaniment, but in addition, in contemplating Jesus as the ultimate embodiment of bold humility as evidenced by his life, death by the cross, and resurrection. An exploration of Greek words for humble, humility, and boldness in the New Testament was performed for the selection of Bible verses used throughout the program. Biblical stories chosen for the Bold Humility program were selected as examples evidencing bold humility and accompaniment. Traditionally, in ELCA contexts, the Road to Emmaus story is used as a paradigm for accompaniment. Partnering with a marginalized community in Guatemala, it seemed important to select stories that included interactions with marginalized peoples, and particularly women. In many of the stories selected, one might even question who is accompanying whom, emphasizing the mutuality of relationship building. Some of these stories include the Tower of Babel, Lazarus' death with an emphasis on Mary, the Ethiopian eunuch, Jesus and the Canaanite woman, Jesus and the woman at the well, and the story of Ruth. The Bold Humility program was highly influenced by several writings of Martin Luther, including the Small Catechism, The Freedom of a Christian, along with Luther's famous teaching question, Was ist das? What does this mean? The Bold Humility Journal titles Daily Reflection Space with What does this mean? And then lists some questions for participants to consider and reflect upon their daily experiences. This question is also used during group gatherings and is part of the Bold Humility Bible Study Communal Lectio Divina process. The creation of the Communal Lectio Divina also drew from Luther's writings on Oratio, Meditatio, Tentatio, beginning with a prayer that is an adaptation of Luther's section on Oratio and emphasizing multiple oral readings. Luther's explanation of the third article of the Creed in his Small Catechism influenced the creation of the Bold Humility program in its intention to integrate reflection and discernment, both individual and communal, into pre, during, and post-travel components. Opportunities are provided in group gatherings, Bible studies, individual journaling, and group processing in country to reflect on and discern how the Holy Spirit is calling, enlightening, and sanctifying participants along with the whole Christian church on earth. In fact, this is one of the main focuses of the Bold Humility program throughout its usage, reflection and discernment as to what God, through the Holy Spirit, is calling participants to be or do as a result of their learning and reflection. Finally, Luther's writing, The Freedom of a Christian, has greatly influenced the Bold Humility program with a focus on how Christians are to interact with their neighbor, both in global and local contexts. In particular, the program seeks to embody Luther's wisdom that Christian individuals do not live in themselves, but in Christ and their neighbor. This is the essence of the concept of bold humility and its emphasis on relationship with God and each other. So now I would like to give you a brief overview of the program itself, which will be described in much more detail for those interested in my forum that follows this keynote. Here we see pre-travel components, which include an informational session, orientation and learning videos, Bible study, and a gathering. The informational session is an opportunity for potential participants to learn about the short-term mission trip and ask questions or voice concerns. Orientation and learning videos provide an introduction to Tree for Hope, Hope Academy, and some language and cultural learning pieces. A 3-week pre-travel Bible study is available for congregations who would like an extended period of learning before travel. This Bible study focuses on learning and reflection to aid in the new praxis of accompaniment using stories of bold humility. The pre-travel gathering occurs during the 2 to 4 weeks before travel and is designed to bring together all participants, which may be from the same location or different locations and congregations. This meeting uses a hybrid model, allowing congregational participants to choose to gather in person or online, along with the facilitators. In this way, congregations from different parts of the country who are traveling at the same time can be introduced to each other. The in-country facilitator leads this meeting virtually. Next, we have our during travel components, which includes another gathering, group experiences and reflection, a journal, and worship and sending. Once all group participants have arrived in Guatemala, this arrival gathering will occur with specific activities designed to help various groups of people come together to form a new community. Daily group experiences and communal reflection will help the group to process the day while also creating deeper relationships. The Bold Humility Journal provides each individual with an opportunity to self-reflect and discern each day as it is helpful for them. And a final worship service and sending is planned during the final day before travel, providing a God-focused time of closure and of new beginnings. I wanted to give you just a flavor of the Bold Humility Journal as it's an important part of learning, reflection, and discernment. And so you'll see on the slide 2 pages from the journal, which is designed to be used daily while in country. And you can see that part of the daily reflection is guided, asking participants to reflect on people they were forming relationships with, language and cultural learning, identification of bold humility in action, and even identifying what was challenging to them that day. There's also a more open-ended question page entitled, "What does this mean?" offering participants a Bible verse to meditate on that focuses on humility or boldness, along with questions to consider what they are learning about themselves and God and their interconnectedness with the people they are building relationship alongside. The post-travel gathering occurs using the same hybrid format as the pre-travel gathering, and it's planned during the first month after participants arrive home. Post-travel surveys are also designed to be sent out at different times, assessing participants' experience with pre, during, and post-travel programming, and also concentrating on the participants' discernment and action steps since returning home. A 3-week post-travel Bible study is available for congregations who would like to continue a time of learning together after travel. This Bible study focuses on discernment and next steps while further exploring a new praxis of accompaniment, again using stories of bold humility. The calendar of opportunities contains ongoing opportunities for education, continued global relationship building, and action steps. An example of the calendar of opportunities can be seen here, and it's a really crucial part of the program. This calendar of opportunities has been created to move the participant from the intention of their short-term mission trip being a once-and-done event toward an embodied theology of ongoing relationship building, learning, reflection, and discernment. The Bold Humility calendar of opportunities will be ongoing, with new opportunities being added as they become available in conjunction with such partners as LIRS, Amparo, LAMPA, ULS, and the Lower Susquehanna Synod. The Bold Humility calendar of opportunities follows a liturgical calendar rather than a typical calendar year to provide theological connections between opportunities and participants' expressions of faith. Opportunities are specifically crafted to emphasize that bold humility includes a commitment to continued and cultural and language learning, long welcome and hospitality, witness and advocacy, continued relationship building, and individual and communal discernment and action. So we touched briefly on the components of the Bold Humility program, and the Forum From Theory to Praxis will provide a more detailed look at these components. We will also be spending time in the forum talking about potential adaptations of the program to other contexts that might include short-term mission trips to other global locations or to locations within the United States. But I believe that this program could also be adapted locally in contexts where congregational leaders might be facilitating events, encounters, or learning experiences with their congregation and other communities. These might include working with refugee and immigrant communities, communities experiencing homelessness, LGBTQIA+ communities, creation care, and racial justice work, to name a few. And I'm sure the Gather group might have other ideas and applications as well. In fact, I would love for a couple of people to bring to the forum an idea specifically to explore, and we could talk about which parts of the program might be adapted and how. So this is an invitation to all of you. So what does bold humility look like in action? In closing, I would like to share a story with you as one example of bold humility enacted between a Guatemalan family and two Lower Susquehanna Synod churches. You can see two sisters in this photo, Xiomara and Clara, who are students at Hope Academy, Guatemala. Xiomara came to us in 2020, which was the year we officially opened on-site at our newly finished first floor of Hope Academy. At that point, we began seeking sponsors for her education, and Trinity Lutheran Church in Steelton stepped up to be her sponsor, or as our children say, their godparents. As you can imagine, we had to close the school building shortly after we opened as the pandemic hit and everything shut down. During the first year of the pandemic, Xiomara's parents separated, and it was very difficult for our teachers to connect with her and to get parental involvement. In 2021, her father asked if we would also accept her younger sister, Clara, or Clarita, as she's known at Hope Academy. We did. We accepted Clara, and St. Peter's Lutheran Church in Highspire stepped up as her godparents. Again, we struggled with communication and parental commitment throughout the school year, and the girls were really failing most of their subjects. They were put on academic probation and were in danger of losing their scholarships. As the 2022 school year was set to begin, we had, as an academic community, decided that without parental commitment, we could not continue educating Xiomara and Clara, and notified their father. He responded by showing up in person at our school with the girls on the first day of teacher training, asking for another chance, promising to be committed to getting them to school, which is really a countercultural commitment. During this entire time, Trinity and St. Peter's did not waver in their support of the girls' education, but with humility continued their commitment to this family. Xiomara and Clara and their father knew that their schoolwork and grades were shared throughout the year with their sponsor congregation. The girls asked often of their godparents and if they might come to visit someday. And they got their wish. In March of this year, Pastor Chad Butts visited Hope Academy, Guatemala, along with Pastor Molly Haggerty, to learn about their model of education to start a Hope Academy preschool in our synod, which, by the way, is opening later this year at St. Peter's in Middletown, and hopefully in 2024, a second at Trinity Steelton. And the kids in Hope Academy PA will be in virtual class with the girls in Hope Academy Guatemala, also learning to build relationships globally, embodying bold humility. And so I am happy to give you a 2023 report card update for Xiomara and Clarita. Each of these girls had 2 Bs and the rest all As in their first marking period of this current school year, which began in January. They are thriving at Hope Academy, and it was the partnership embodying bold humility that facilitated their success. So thank you, Trinity, St. Peter's, and Pastor Butts for boldly partnering with them with humility and grace. And thank you also to the over 20 Lower Susquehanna Synod congregations who partner with children and their families in Guatemala in long-term ways that value relationship, mutuality, and interconnectedness with bold humility. This final slide contains an on the scale of tortilla graphic I created to use in the Bold Humility program, and it's provided here for you right now. So please interact with this graphic to let us know, on a scale of tortilla, how are you feeling? Are you puffed up full of hot air, ready to ask a question? Are you feeling fried with a lot of information? Or was the presentation deliciously warm like a homemade soup? Thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions and hear your thoughts.